Welcome to the Fashion Algorithm. So today we are diving headfirst into a question, a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds in the fashion world these days. And that is whether or not AI, artificial intelligence, is it going to take over the creative process in fashion design? Or is it going to be, this ultimate partner for human designers? It's a really fascinating question. And, you guys have sent in a really, really interesting collection of articles that explore this very topic. So our mission today is to kind of cut through all the noise and try to, extract those key insights for you, help make sense of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a really diverse set of perspectives here. Everything from how AI is actually being used, today in the industry to what some experts think, about its role going forward into the future. And the goal here is to really give you a clear picture of, what's actually significant in this rapidly changing landscape of fashion and AI.
Right. Right. And before we jump into all that, quick word from our sponsor, cloutfit.ai. Just imagine seeing an influencer and, they have an outfit that you absolutely love and you can instantly shop like every single piece, in that outfit. That is the power of CloutFit AI. It's they connect influencer content directly to product inventories, which makes the influencers look instantly shoppable. So it's driving more sales and higher order value for businesses. So yeah, it's a really innovative approach. Kind of like the AI that we're going to be discussing today. So if you want to learn more, you can visit cloutfit.ai. That's CLOUTFIT.ai. It is. That's a really great example of AI already kind of transforming the way that we interact with fashion, at least on the consumer side of things. Now we're gonna get into how it's also changing how fashion is actually designed and created. Yeah, exactly. For you, yeah, as someone who's clearly interested in the ways that technology is reshaping different sectors, this is going to be especially relevant. We're gonna be looking at the real world, applications of AI in fashion right now, today, and really try to get a grasp of what could the future hold for both AI and human creativity, in this field.
All right, so let's start unpacking this whole thing. What is the current landscape of AI in fashion? What does that actually look like?
Well, it's actually moving beyond just the experimental stages quite rapidly. So AI, it's not just a futuristic concept in fashion anymore. It's really being integrated into different parts of the industry, from the very initial design ideas all the way to how brands are connecting with customers. Right. Mm-hmm. So where are we seeing AI making the most tangible difference right now? Where's it really making an impact?
Well, one of the most significant areas, I would say, is in data analysis. Being able to analyze just these huge amounts of data. So you have these AI algorithms that are being used to process just everything. From social media trends to runway show data going, way back, all the way to, even really specific details about what consumers are buying and what they're searching for. And the goal here, of course, is to be able to predict upcoming fashion trends with much more, accuracy, than traditional methods. You think about it, AI can sift through literally millions of data points, and it can identify these, very subtle shifts in preferences that a human analyst they might completely miss. So this allows designers to create collections that are much more in tune with what the market wants, what people are actually looking for, and that can potentially lead to fewer unsold items, which is a real strategic advantage for any brand.
Yeah, for sure. So it's moving away from just gut feeling and intuition and really moving towards data informed creative decisions. And that sounds like a pretty significant shift.
It is. And it's not just about predicting trends either. AI is also having a pretty big impact on the manufacturing side of things as well. So AI-driven automation, it's really improving the precision of, the actual production processes. It's speeding up manufacturing times. And ultimately, it's helping fashion businesses operate in a more cost-effective way.
Right. So it's from figuring out what people want to wear to, actually producing it
Yeah.
faster and more efficiently. It's already involved in so many parts of the fashion process. But I think the big question for you and I'm sure for a lot of designers out there is this just the first step towards AI eventually just taking over the entire creative process?
Well, that's the big debate, isn't it? And it's interesting, even people who are really, deeply involved in developing AI, for fashion, they themselves are, saying or expressing this belief that AI it won't actually ever replace that fundamental, human creativity. Take Calvin Wong, for example, who developed Ada, the interactive design assistant for fashion. He argues that AI, it'll never truly replicate, that original spark, that ingenuity that humans have.
Okay. So Ada, that sounds like a really key example here. So what does it actually do, and how does it kind of support this idea of AI being more like a tool rather than
Yeah.
a replacement?
Yeah. Aided it's actually a really fascinating system, and it's designed, as a designer-led AI. So it uses image recognition, to really accelerate the early stages of the design process. So it can take initial sketches from a designer, and it can very very quickly generate a whole range of different potential design proposals. But the really crucial point here is that it works with the designer's input. It recognizes existing design elements, like fabric types and patterns and colors, and then it generates new combinations, variations based on those elements. So the designer, they then have all these different AI generated options to consider, and then they can refine those and incorporate those into their own creative vision.
Right. Okay. So it's not like AI is coming up with these completely original ideas out of nowhere. It's more about you know being this really powerful engine for exploring a bunch of possibilities based on the initial direction that the designer gives it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Wong, he emphasizes that Ada's, real strength lies in its ability to present, just a massive amount, of potential combinations that a designer, they might have never even thought of, on their own. So it's really expanding that, creative playing field in ways that weren't even possible before AI. And there was even an exhibition at the M Plus Museum in Hong Kong, that showcased collections from 14 different designers, who had used data in their work. So it's a really tangible way to see this collaborative approach in action.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like, it's really like, putting it out there in the real world. And it sounds like AI is kind of handling those more, combinatorial aspects of design, and that frees up, the human designers to really focus on, those truly, novel conceptual leaps, right?
Exactly. Because when you really think about it, fashion design, it's not just about the technical execution. It involves a deep understanding of cultural trends, and an understanding of emotional resonance, and even a certain level of artistic intuition. And these are all qualities that AI, at least in its current form, it just hasn't been able to replicate. Naram Barfield from the Royal College of Art, he said that, AI, it's likely to have this really, transformational impact, across the whole fashion industry. Everything from the initial idea, like, to even, recycling a garment at the end of its life. But, it's looking like, this transformation is going to be one that really enhances human capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the overall sentiment seems to be that this is a partnership,
Yeah.
like a real collaboration between humans and AI, where AI kind of takes on that heavy lifting, the data analysis, the really fast generation of variations and all that, and that allows designers to really hone in on those higher level creative decisions, that require a human's unique insight.
Yeah, that's a really, really accurate way to put it. AI can handle those more, routine tasks. It can churn out like tons of different, iterations, on a theme, and it can process these huge, massive amounts of data. But, a core creative vision, that emotional connection, that cultural narrative, all of that, that still very much lies with the human designer.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about Ada as one specific example,
Mm.
but what about the wider ecosystem of AI fashion tech companies? Are there other kind of interesting players emerging out there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the landscape is full of all these innovative startups, and a lot of them are, really focusing on very, very specific, applications of AI, within the fashion world. So for example, you have Curated for You,
Yeah.
and they were founded in 2022, and they've actually developed, what they're calling a lifestyle knowledge graph. And essentially what that is it's their AI that connects, product discovery with consumer lifestyles and the trends that are, happening right now. So they help retailers to really match their products with what consumers are actually interested in, like based on their broader lifestyle,
Yeah.
and their motivations. And this has been shown to really, increase, the conversion rates, how often people actually buy something after they've seen it.
Oh, that's really interesting. So they're using AI to kind of improve how existing fashion gets to the consumer. It's
Yeah.
not like they're designing new clothes themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Their main focus is on optimizing, the retail experience through intelligent product recommendations.
Okay.
And then you have, companies like Reverie AI. They were founded in 2020, and they're really tackling the challenges of online shopping, with this, virtual dressing room technology. So they use computer vision and AI to allow shoppers to really see how clothes are going to look, on personalized, virtual models. So for someone who's shopping online, that can really take away, a lot of the guesswork.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the virtual try-ons.
Yeah.
Something that I think so many of us have wished for. When we're browsing online, like
Yeah.
how is this actually going to look on me?
Exactly. And there's another company, that's worth mentioning, called AI.Fashion. They were also founded in 2020. And while, the details of their technology, it's not really, as widely publicized, as some of the other companies. But the fact that they're out there, along with all these other, innovators, it suggests that they're developing, their own, AI-powered solutions, for the fashion industry. And I think what's really important to remember about all these startups is that they're very often addressing, really specific pain points, or opportunities, within that whole fashion ecosystem. So again, it kind of supports this idea, of AI as this very targeted, tool, rather than a, broad replacement, for human creativity.
It's almost like the real innovation is happening in these very specialized areas.
Yeah.
You know, where they're providing these really practical solutions.
Yeah.
To existing challenges. So let's talk about some of the actual AI fashion design products and tools that are actually out there that are available. What can designers or even everyday consumers, like what can people actually use right now?
Well, there's a growing number of tools that are, pretty accessible. For consumers, My Eat It is a really, notable, AI outfit generator. And it allows users to just digitally experiment with their style, explore different fashion combinations, visualize potential outfits, without even having to, actually try anything on physically. So it's a really fun way, to just get inspiration and see, what different looks, might suit you.
That's really cool. So, for anyone who's interested in fashion, it's a great way to just play around and kind of, experiment with different styles. But what about, tools that are really kind of, geared toward, like professional designers? Are there specific tools out there for them?
Yeah, yeah. For professionals, the New Black, they offer a really comprehensive, suite of AI powered tools.
Mm.
They have virtual try-on features, just like we talked about before. But they also have, functionalities that can transform, like sketches into full digital designs. They can generate AI powered mood boards, and they can even provide, really up to date trend analysis. And designers can create outfit mock-ups on these customizable AI models. They can adjust, things like age, body type, even perceived cultural background, which is really interesting. The platform also includes, all sorts of, features to refine, design prompts and tools for both manual and automatic, editing.
Wow. That sounds really powerful. I mean, from that initial, spark of an idea, in a sketch, all the way to, really detailed, digital, visualization, and all within, one platform.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also have, tools like Outfits AI, and they focus on generating, really high quality, realistic, outfit images, specifically for, commercial use. So this is great, for creating visuals, for things like marketing materials, or for online stores. And it can work with, a variety of, input image types, so it's pretty versatile. And then for a more specific, kind of need, there's Suit Me Up, and they specialize in generating, these really realistic, images of users in suits. So that's, great for professional use, if you need a professional headshot or something like that. And also, for personal use as well. And I think all of these, examples, they really highlight how AI is being used to really augment, these very specific parts of the fashion process. Everything from helping consumers explore their personal style to assisting, professionals with design and marketing workflows.
Right. It's almost like, AI is kind of like stepping in to handle, certain, tasks, with this incredible efficiency.
Yeah.
And that really kind of leads us to, the question of advantages, like what are the real benefits,
Yeah.
what are the real advantages that AI brings to the fashion world?
Oh, yeah. Well, enhanced efficiency is definitely a major benefit. As we've been discussing, AI can really speed up, both design and production cycles.
Yeah.
It can generate design variations much faster, than a human could, if they were doing it, manually. And automation in manufacturing, that leads to greater precision, and it also, just speeds up those turnaround times.
Yeah. And in the fashion industry, which is, so fast paced,
Mhm.
that speed and efficiency, I mean, that has to be, a really huge advantage.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the predictive power that we were talking about, earlier. So by analyzing all this vast amount of data, AI can really help designers to make sure that their collections are aligned with upcoming trends, and that can lead to more successful products, and also, fewer unsold items, which is not only a financial benefit, but also an environmental benefit as well.
Well, yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, reducing, waste and being more responsive to, consumer demand. I mean, that's crucial, in today's market.
Yeah.
So what other advantages does AI offer, besides those?
Well, personalization is another key area. AI is what makes, technologies like virtual try-ons possible, and that's something that, really improves the online shopping experience for consumers. And it also powers, those personalized product recommendations, so it's connecting, shoppers with items that they're more likely to be interested in. And for designers, AI can even assist in adapting designs to better suit, different body types, which can, potentially make fashion more inclusive,
Right.
overall.
So it's not just about, making the process faster and more efficient. It's also about creating, better experiences, for the people who are creating fashion, but also for for the people who are wearing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But it's really important to kind of have this balanced view and to realize that there are definitely limitations and challenges associated with AI in fashion. That we need to think about.
Right, right. So what are some of those main hurdles or concerns as AI becomes more integrated into the fashion world?
Well, the big one, I mean, naturally is the question of true creativity and originality.
Yeah.
While AI can it can analyze existing styles and it can generate these variations. It currently lacks the ability, to come up with, truly novel, groundbreaking concepts.
Mhm.
It really just operates based on the data that it's trained on. So essentially, it's remixing, existing ideas. And as Calvin Wong pointed out, that fundamental spark, of original, human creativity. I mean, that's still something it's really unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fashion, I mean, at its core, it's really often about, pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
and expressing, unique artistic visions. And it does seem like that's, kind of a difficult thing for, an algorithm to truly replicate.
Exactly, exactly. And then there are also really really important questions around privacy and data security. AI systems, they often require access to just these massive amounts of data, including very personal style preferences. So making sure that data is being handled ethically and securely. I mean, that's a huge challenge for the industry.
Yeah. Data privacy is a growing concern, in all areas of technology and fashion, with its very personal nature, it's no exception.
Yeah.
Are there other limitations, or other challenges that we should be aware of?
Intellectual property rights are another one. Like how do you actually attribute ownership, to AI generated designs? Like who legally owns a design that was, partly created by an AI. And that uncertainty could really make some designers, a bit hesitant, to really embrace these technologies. And then finally, we can't forget about the potential for job displacement, especially in manufacturing and in retail roles, as automation, powered by AI becomes more widespread.
Yeah, these are all, really, really important, points to consider.
Yeah.
It's not just about the exciting, possibilities. It's also about, navigating those ethical and those practical, implications as well. And it's really interesting to kind of, look at how AI is impacting, other creative fields as well. And we have some information here about graphic design. So what kind of parallels can we draw, from what's happening in graphic design, to what's happening in the fashion world?
Yeah, well, the advancements in AI, for graphic design, I mean, they offer some really, really insightful parallels, to what we're seeing in fashion, and specifically, OpenAI's recent developments, with their GPT-4o, image generator, that's particularly relevant, because it's really showing a lot of potential, for actual, practical professional use, in areas like advertising, and graphic design. And it's actually overcoming some of the previous limitations, that previous AIs, struggled with. Things like, being able to precisely place objects, within an image. And generating text within images, these are things that are really important for commercial applications. So it's becoming much more useful.
So it's becoming a more, like practical and versatile tool, for visual communication in that field.
Yeah, exactly. And just like we've been talking about with AI and fashion, OpenAI is really framing this technology as a new tool for communication. It's an assistant to human designers rather than something that's intended to replace them. And the fact that you can upload and modify existing images, I mean that's a really really key feature. And it suggests that the workflow is going to be one where where AI is augmenting human creativity. It's not trying to get rid of it or to supplant it or anything like that.
Right. Right. And it seems like this theme of, collaboration, rather than, this complete takeover. I mean, that seems to be pretty consistent,
Yeah.
across different, creative industries as AI evolves.
It really does. And just like, fashion involves this really deep understanding of cultural context, and it evokes these emotional responses in people. Graphic design does that too. And these are areas where human designers, they still have a really crucial advantage. AI might be really great, at the technical execution, but the strategic thinking and the conceptual thinking, the what and the why behind the design, that still remains, really firmly in the human realm. And I think this parallel, it really suggests that we're probably going to see a similar pattern of this kind of augmentation, in fashion as well.
Okay, so looking ahead, it really does seem like collaboration. That's really the key. So
Yeah.
what's your overall perspective on the future of AI in fashion design?
Hmm.
Where do you think this is all headed?
Well, I think, if we look at the evidence, it really points towards a future where humans and AI are collaborating more and more. It's not going to be a case of AI just completely replacing, designers, the emotional aspects of fashion, the cultural aspects, the artistic aspects. I mean, all of that, that demands, human sensibilities, and the trend that we're seeing, with all these specialized AI tools, that are emerging across, the whole fashion value chain, everything from product discovery to virtual try-ons to, design assistance. I mean, it really reinforces this idea, that AI is really going to be about, this very targeted, augmentation of what humans can do.
Okay, so you're thinking that designers might start focusing more on that high level creator direction,
Yeah.
And then the cultural interpretation of trends, and then they'll kind of leverage AI to handle those more technical, those more data intensive aspects, of their work.
Yeah, I think that's a very likely scenario. I think the main question, going forward, it's not really, whether AI will replace designers. The question is how are designers going to effectively integrate AI, as a creative partner? How are they going to harness, AI's power while still, maintaining those essential human elements, that make fashion so meaningful and so impactful.
Right, right.
Yeah.